The alarms didn't wail so much as throb, angry red banners pulsing across 6 flat screens like a heartbeat gone wrong. Outbound breach vector East Asia flagged at 5:10, read the central monitor, the number ticking as if it had somewhere more important to be. Elena Cross leaned in, her fingers flying, a precise blur over a navy keyboard she'd worn to a satin shine. She'd been in the building since before sunrise, partly because that's what senior security architects do when their gut rumbles, partly because insomnia had wrapped itself around her life so tightly she'd forgotten what quiet sleep felt like. Packet inspection to deep, she said, not quite to herself. Reroute through Zurich, stagger the transfers, choke the spoof. She spoke in the calm tone of a surgeon. Her team across the operations floor watched her screen like weather chasers tracking a tornado, devout curiosity spiked with fear. at.a.m. Cross, a junior analyst, called from 2 rows over. Do I freeze Tokyo entirely? If you have to ask, the answer is yes, Elena replied without looking up. Do it in 12-second intervals. That keeps their regulator from melting down while we cut the wire. On the far wall, the company's ticker, ARGT, rolled green and smug, unfazed by internal panic. Argent Technologies had made its money and reputation on being the bank behind the banks, the pipes under the city, the brainstem of money moving at the speed of light. Elena had built a good swath of those pipes. Not the pretty part the press loved, the gleaming lobby along Wacker Drive or the founder's bronze bust, but the quiet redundancies, the rat's nest of protections that kept mistakes from becoming disasters. Cross, the shout cracked the air like a dropped plate. She didn't turn. She recognized the voice. Everyone did. Marcus Vail, the new CEO with a smile made for CNBC and a resume heavy with buzzwords, came striding down the aisle between workstations as if he were walking a runway. 2 HR managers formed a V behind him, their handbags defensive shields, their faces set to the same stern expression, professional pity. Not now, Elena said, eyes locked on the code waterfall. We're mid-containment now, Vail said. He stopped at the edge of her desk and set down a leather folder as if it were a summons. Elena Cross, you're done here. Hand over your badge. The room went dead silent, the way an office does when something indecent happens and everyone realizes they're trapped inside it. Even the printers seemed to hush. On Elena's main display, the exploits needles were flattening. The sequence she'd threaded through Zurich was working. One more command and the hemorrhage would clot. She typed 3 letters, then stopped. You're firing me in the middle of a live breach, she asked without inflection. Terminating, Vail corrected. Effective immediately. Your approach is outdated. We're pivoting to speed and scale. We can't have relic processes holding us back. Relic? She finally looked up at him, tall, immaculate, the kind of man who could turn a boardroom into a theater by simply entering it. I wrote the framework that kept this company alive through 2 cycles of international scrutiny. You're standing on the relic badge, he said. The taller HR manager stepped forward, soft-voiced and firm. at.a.m. Cross, please. Elena held her ID card between her fingers and for a second considered the weight of it. 20 years of weekends surrendered, of birthdays observed by FaceTime from conference rooms, of proving to faceless auditors that the invisible was safe. She set the badge down on the desk, just a sliver of plastic and copper, suddenly ordinary. This transfer stream is still active, she said to the HR manager as if Vail weren't there. If someone doesn't throttle Frankfurt in the next 60 seconds, the regulators will see delays, and we have a team, Vail said. We'll be fine, he meant I'll be fine. He always did. Elena's monitor flashed a line she knew by heart, a white message bar, unadorned, the kind of thing a careful reader might notice and everyone else would miss. She let the corner of her mouth tighten, almost a smile, not quite. Curious, she murmured. What? Vail demanded. Nothing. She stood, collected the mug she'd owned longer than most executives lasted, a chipped navy thing from a programming conference in Austin, and took in the room. Noah Dunn, the junior analyst with the restless foot, was watching her like someone memorizing a route they'd need when the lights went out. She held his gaze half a second and dipped her chin once, watched the logs. Elena, said a voice behind Vail, Jules from compliance, eyes wet. I'm sorry, don't be, Elena said. She didn't bother gathering the framed photos or the stress ball or the potted ivy that had somehow survived 4 winters of fluorescent light. Her hands were steady. The humiliation would arrive later, the kind that blooms in the chest on the walk to the elevator, but for now the numbness was a gift. Vale slid the termination letter from the folder and slapped it, palm down, onto her desk. He had the showman's touch, always playing to the cheap seats. "Signed and sealed," he said. Of course. Elena glanced at the signature, his, and then at the clock on the wall, 10:03 a.m. "At escort MS. Cross out," Vale said to HR, already turning, already done with her. She took one last look at the screens, at the thread she'd woven just shy of complete, and walked. People lowered their eyes as she passed, shame pinballing between pity and relief. The security guard near the elevators shifted his weight, trying to look official rather than human. At the glass doors she paused. She could see the river, still gray and bracing. She could see her reflection, a woman in a navy blazer who looked like every other middle-aged professional in downtown Chicago, and yet not. "OMS. Cross," the guard prompted. She pushed the door and stepped into the October air. The city noise rushed her, sirens somewhere, a bus grinding up Michigan, a vendor's bell. Elena closed her eyes, exhaled once, and opened them to the bright. Behind her, through the mirrored facade, she could still make out a smear of red on a distant screen, blinking a silent word that few understood and which she alone had buried in the system years ago. It read, "Authorization pending, original architect required." Elena tucked her hands into her pockets and started walking. The lobby of Argent Technologies was a cathedral of glass and echo. Even the air smelled expensive, fresh polish, paper, and the faint metallic tang of recycled ambition. Elena Cross sat on a low leather bench near the revolving doors, her deactivated badge still warm in her hand. The security guard who'd escorted her out had already gone back inside, his footsteps fading into the white hum of the building. She was alone now, just another body expelled from the corporate bloodstream. Her reflection trembled in the glass wall opposite her. The woman staring back didn't look furious, just hollowed out, as if the morning had vacuumed the marrow out of her bones. Her mind replayed the last hour in relentless detail, Vale's polished arrogance, the stifled gasps, the line of red code she hadn't finished typing. She thumbed open her phone, half expecting a message from the operations floor, someone begging her to log in and fix whatever mess Vale had unleashed. Nothing. Just silence, except for a text from her daughter, Maddie. "Midterms next week. Wish me luck, Mom, don't stress so much, okay?" Elena stared at the message for a long time. Her throat tightened. Maddie didn't know yet, none of them did, that her mother had just lost the job that had paid for both kids, tuition, and the mortgage on a house she barely lived in. Her thoughts slipped backward, unspooling 20 years in reverse. She'd joined Argent in 2005, when Chicago's tech scene was still more promise than empire. Back then, she'd believed in the company's mission, security through trust. She remembered sitting in her first meeting with the founding CEO who told her, "We don't just move money, we move belief." That line had hooked her completely. In those early years, she'd been unstoppable, sleeping under her desk during crises, living off stale coffee and adrenaline. Her kids would peek into her home office at night, whispering, "Mom's still working," as if it were a ritual prayer. Every major system upgrade, every international audit, her fingerprints were there. But no one outside the digital trenches ever saw her. That invisibility had once felt noble. Now it just felt pathetic. "OMS. Cross," she looked up. The voice belonged to Elena Briggs, a tall woman in a slate trench coat, her gray-streaked hair tied back with severe precision. Elena's presence in the lobby felt almost unreal. She was a senior regulator at the International Securities Commission, the same one that monitored Argent's transactions. "Elena," Elena said softly, approaching with a tone that was half concern, half command. "I just got an alert. Tokyo and Frankfurt are both holding back their transfers." "What's going on in there?" Elena blinked. "Holding back? What kind of alert?" "Missing biometric confirmation," Elena said, sliding her phone across the bench. On the screen, the words glared in bold type. "Argent System, Authorization DELAYD, Primary Architect not VRF." Elena's pulse kicked. "That can't be right. My credentials were," she stopped herself. "And of course, they'd been revoked 10 minutes ago." Elena studied her. "They think you're still inside the system. I called your direct line. Some intern picked up and said you'd been escorted out." Her tone darkened. "During an active compliance cycle," Elena swallowed hard. "Vale fired me mid-containment. I didn't finish the lockdown script." "Jesus Christ," Elena muttered. He terminated the architect during a live violation. That's about the size of it. Alina tried to sound detached, but her voice shook. Alina straightened, her expression unreadable. You realize what that means, don't you? If your signature's missing, Argent's global transfers are hanging midstream. Tokyo, Frankfurt, Toronto, they'll all freeze within the hour. The color drained from Alina's face. They won't be able to override it. Not without the original key. You built a safeguard no one else can touch. It was policy proofing, Alina said defensively. We had too many execs bypassing controls for speed. I embedded a biometric clause for accountability. Alina let out a low whistle. You realize that makes you the only person who can stop this, right? Alina glanced toward the revolving doors, where the city outside was alive and indifferent. I'm not sure they deserve saving. That's not the point, Alina said. You design the spine of the world's money flow. If this goes south, it's not just Argent, it's every market connected to it. Alina pressed her palms against her knees, forcing herself to breathe. Inside her chest, shame and vindication twisted like wires. For the first time in her career, she had no clearance, no desk, no authority, yet the world might still depend on her. Alina's phone buzzed again. She glanced down, then looked up, her face tense. It's spreading, she said. Frankfurt's halted 500 million in trades. You need to make a decision, Alina. Right now, Alina's eyes rose to the tower's mirrored surface, her reflection fracturing against the glass. A decision, she murmured. They already made it for me, but even as she said it, a flicker of something colder, resolve, maybe lit behind her eyes. The ghost in the machine wasn't gone yet. And if the system was still listening, she wasn't finished talking. Marcus Vale adjusted his cufflinks in the reflection of the boardroom glass, admiring how the city skyline framed him like a success story. The Chicago River glittered beneath the late morning sun, clean, efficient, a beat. He smiled faintly. So should his company. Behind him, a dozen board members murmured over reports, their voices carrying the low buzz of restrained panic. Vale silenced them with a raised hand and the kind of smile that said, I've already solved it. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, pacing slowly along the window, what you witnessed this morning was necessary. Alina Cross was a brilliant technician, no doubt. But she built walls when this company needs highways. I didn't come here to maintain the past. I came to accelerate the future, a few nods. Some polite, some anxious. Linda Barr, chief financial officer, cleared her throat. Marcus, the markets are getting jittery. We've had 2 compliance flags in the last 40 minutes, Tokyo and Frankfurt. They're requesting biometric confirmation from Cross's system, and no one seems to know how to bypass it. Vale waved a hand, dismissive. A minor latency. It's already on it, that wasn't true. Downstairs, the IT department looked less like a team and more like a triage unit. Monitors blinked amber warnings. Analysts whispered over keyboards, trading theories and caffeine like currency. Noah Dunn, the youngest among them, leaned toward his supervisor. Sir, it's escalating. Frankfurt's transaction queues are looping. They're calling it authorization fatigue, thousands of failed authentications every second. His supervisor didn't look up. Keep quiet about it. The CEO asked, giving a presentation to the board. You want to be the guy who embarrasses him? But the loop originated right after Cross's ID was revoked, Noah said, voice low but urgent. Her system's designed to validate continuous access. Removing her triggered a cascade. The supervisor shot him a warning glance. You like having a job done, then keep your theories to yourself. Noah stared at his monitor. Lines of error code blinked like SOS signals. He minimized the window, opened a secure folder, and began saving the logs to an encrypted drive. His hands shook slightly. Whatever this was, it was bigger than a glitch. Upstairs, Vale continued his sermon. Innovation demands courage, he said, flashing the polished grin that had won him every CNBC segment for the past 6 months. Cross didn't adapt. She hoarded control. She built systems that made her indispensable, and that kind of thinking suffocates growth. Today we cut the cord. Marcus, Linda interrupted again, less politely this time. With all due respect, we can't transfer funds without that biometric signature. We're talking hundreds of millions. Vale turned, his smile cooling. We have redundancies. Don't worry, Linda. We'll rewrite the architecture. Across the table, Elliot Kramer, the head of risk, spoke for the first time. And how long will that take? You terminated the only person who understood the core framework. Her team doesn't even have full access to her encryption tables. Vale's patience thinned. Then they'll reverse engineer them. That's what I pay engineers for. Kramer held his gaze. With respect, you're gambling with a global payment system. Vale's jaw flexed. You're talking to the man who's kept this company profitable every quarter since taking over. Maybe try a little faith instead of fear. The room went quiet. The unspoken rule of corporate America hung heavy. No one contradicts a CEO in front of a board unless they're ready to clear their desk. Vale broke the silence with a bright, performative laugh. Relax. By lunch, this will be a funny story about growing pains. By close of market, we'll be trending for all the right reasons. As he spoke, Noah's encrypted drive finished copying. He slipped it into his pocket, heart pounding. He'd just committed what was technically theft. But every instinct told him this wasn't a simple malfunction, it was a countdown. Meanwhile, Vale leaned over the table, lowering his voice into something almost confessional. You all wanted speed. You wanted scale. That's what I'm delivering. Elena Cross was a brilliant fossil, let's not pretend otherwise. Outside, the hum of the city went on uninterrupted. But inside Argent Technologies, a tremor of unease rippled through every department, spreading faster than any official memo. Noah looked once more at the error logs on his screen. The final line blinked in red, an automated prompt repeating itself like a warning from the grave. Authorization denied. Original architect signature required. He exhaled sharply, the truth settling like ice in his chest. Vale wasn't leading a company anymore. He was standing on a landmine, smiling for the cameras, while the timer ticked under his feet. And the only person who could stop it was already walking away into the Chicago cold. By the time Elena reached the corner of Wacker and Adams, the city had shaken off the morning chill. The hum of Chicago life, car horns, elevated trains, coffee carts, pressed against her ears like static. She stopped at a crosswalk, clutching her phone, trying to quiet the buzz in her chest. The world was moving on as it always did. Argent's tower gleamed behind her, reflecting sunlight like a mirror refusing to show its cracks. Then her phone rang. The caller ID flashed Elena Briggs again. Tell me you're near a computer, Elena's voice snapped through the line. I'm not, Elena replied, walking toward a cafe. I'm unemployed, remember, computers are privileges now. This isn't funny, Elena said. Frankfurt's been down 20 minutes. Tokyo just escalated to red status. They're holding over $1 billion in pending transfers. Elena froze. $1 billion, yes, and climbing. Argent's backend is rejecting all external authentications. The system keeps spitting the same message, primary architect verification required. Elena rubbed her temple, a slow ache building behind her eyes. That clause wasn't supposed to lock the system out, it was designed to prevent tampering. Vale must have triggered a security feedback loop when he revoked my credentials. Can you undo it? Elena asked. Elena gave a short, bitter laugh. I'd need access to the core network and a badge that still works. Vale made sure I don't have either, Elena's voice dropped. He's spinning this as a foreign hack. He's already briefing the press. Of course he is, Elena said. It's always easier to blame ghosts than arrogance. She ducked into a corner cafe, the kind where every patron wore earbuds and lived on caffeine. She sat by the window, laptop open, piggybacking on public Wi-Fi. The company firewall rejected her immediately. A polite message popped up, access denied. User credential invalid. Elena pressed, I need you to listen to me. If these transfers don't clear within the hour, global regulators will freeze Argent's licenses. We're talking catastrophic exposure. Billions could be stuck midstream. Elena stared at the cafe screen, its blue glow washing over her pale hands. You're saying the system I built to protect them is about to destroy them. I'm saying, Elena replied, you're the only person who can stop it. That sentence landed like a stone. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Elena continued softly, you still have the architect's encryption key, don't you? Elena hesitated. Oh, the key. She'd stored a shadow copy years ago, a last resort. Not out of ego, but because she'd never trusted the board not to trade security for profit. It was buried in a personal drive at home, encrypted with an old passphrase only she would remember. I do, Elena said finally. Then use it, Elena's throat tightened. Do you have any idea what happens if I do that without authorization? I'll be committing cyber intrusion against a private firm. Even if I save them, Vale will paint me as a criminal. Alina didn't flinch. You've spent your life protecting systems that never protected you. Isn't this the moment you decide who you're really loyal to? The words hit harder than intended. Alina looked out the window. Across the street, a massive LED billboard displayed Argent's logo and slogan, "Trust that moves the world." Beneath it, the stock ticker crawled red. Her loyalty had always been to the principal, not the people. But principals didn't pay tuition, didn't keep lights on. And Vale had humiliated her in front of everyone. Her phone buzzed again, a new message. Unknown sender. She opened it. A screenshot appeared, a line of code glowing against a dark background. Authorization denied. Original architect signature required. Underneath, one more line, timestamp 10:32 a.m. Noah Dunn's initials sat in the file's metadata. Alina's chest tightened. Someone inside was still fighting. She typed a reply before she could second-guess herself. Keep the logs. Don't speak to anyone. You'll need proof. Then she called Alina back. If I do this, she said quietly, I want your word the regulators will back me when Vale tries to bury me. Alina exhaled. Oh, you have it. We'll make this right. Alina closed her laptop. No, there's no making it right. But maybe there's stopping it from getting worse. As she stepped back into the street, the autumn wind cut across her face, sharp and bracing. She headed toward the subway, the city's hum growing louder behind her. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't walking toward work. She was walking into a war she hadn't meant to start. And somewhere above her, in the glass tower of Argent Technologies, Marcus Vale was smiling for the cameras, still convinced he was untouchable. The subway roared beneath the city as Alina sat hunched over her phone, her laptop balanced on her knees. The glow from the screen washed her face in pale blue light while the train car rocked and squealed through the tunnel. Her heart thudded with each vibration, syncing with the rising panic unfolding across the world. Frankfurt was offline. Tokyo was frozen. Now Toronto was stalling too. Her inbox flooded with system alerts forwarded from Alina, each subject line colder than the last. Argent crisis update, global transfer queue frozen, regulators demand architect verification. Alina scrolled faster, reading fragments. Pending, biometric required, compliance failure. The code was doing exactly what she had built it to do, protect the system from unauthorized access. Except now she was the unauthorized one. She stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen. Every instinct told her to dive back in, override the system, stabilize the transfers. But without credentials, she couldn't even get through the front door. Her own creation had shut her out completely. A teenager across from her noticed the tension in her face. You okay, lady? He asked, pulling out one earbud. She managed a faint smile. Just a rough morning at work, he nodded sympathetically. My mom says if work doesn't make you cry once a week, you're not doing it right. That almost made her laugh. Almost. When she climbed out at the Lakeview stop, the wind hit her like a slap. She walked quickly toward her apartment, a third-floor walk-up above a laundromat, quiet except for the hum of dryers and the faint smell of detergent. Inside, she dropped her coat, plugged in the laptop, and pulled a small, nondescript flash drive from a locked drawer. The drive was old, brushed aluminum, with a sticker worn down to the outline of a once blue logo. On it lived the shadow key, the code fragment she had written years ago, back when she still believed loyalty was its own reward. It wasn't supposed to be used outside company protocol. Doing so would make her a criminal under federal data law. While she hesitated, the headlines would write themselves. Disgruntled employee hacks Argent Technologies after termination. Her stomach twisted. Her phone buzzed again, Alina calling. Alina, listen, Alina said, voice low, urgent. It's spreading west. Investors are panicking. Argent's trading desks are reporting hundreds of millions locked midstream. If you're going to help, you need to do it now. I'm not sure what you expect, Alina replied, pacing. Vale erased me from the system. Every authentication will flag me as a threat. Then don't go through the front door, Alina said. Go through the skeleton port. Alina stopped mid-step. You remember that? You mentioned it years ago after the Sol breach, Alina said. A buried port invisible to the mainframe. You said it was for emergency forensic audits. It was. But it was also supposed to be untraceable, Alina said. If I use it now, regulators won't see my entry until after I've already broken half a dozen laws. Do you want Vale to win? Alina snapped. He's calling this sabotage, blaming you publicly. CNBC is already running a headline about an internal bad actor. Alina's pulse quickened. He's blaming me, not by name yet, but he's planting it. If you don't fix this, his version becomes truth. Alina sank into her chair. The air in the apartment felt too still, too thick. Her eyes drifted to the photo on her desk. Her kids standing under golden fall leaves, smiling, alive in ways she no longer remembered how to be. I didn't build that system to destroy people, she whispered. Alina's voice softened. Then don't let it. Fix it before someone else does and makes you the villain. Alina clicked open the terminal window, her fingers trembling over the keyboard. She plugged in the drive, the light on it flickering once like a heartbeat. Lines of code scrolled upward, cascading faster than her eyes could follow. For a moment, the world outside her window, sirens in the distance, the hum of the laundromat below faded away. There was only the code, the pulse of logic she knew better than her own heartbeat. Then came the message she dreaded, access point detected. Trace initiated. Someone inside Argent had noticed. Alina's breath caught. She had seconds before they shut her out for good. Her hands flew across the keys. Come on, she muttered. Come on, a single line appeared, connection established, ghost port active. Her relief was instant and short-lived. Another notification popped up, flashing red across her screen, unauthorized intrusion alert source, external home IP. Somewhere high above the city in the mirrored tower of Argent Technologies, her name had just reappeared on the network. And this time, Marcus Vale would know she was back. The first call came at 10:39 a.m. Frankfurt time. By the time it hit Chicago, it had snowballed into a storm. Global paralysis, Alina's voice crackled over the line. Every market tied to Argent is freezing. Tokyo, Frankfurt, Toronto, no one can clear transactions without your biometric. 2 billion in motion, suspended midstream. Alina stared at the scrolling chaos on her screen. 2 billion. She'd written code to prevent a catastrophe, not create one. In Argent's glass tower, Marcus Vale faced his own reckoning. Cameras clicked in the boardroom. He stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, voice sharp and defensive. It's a cyber attack. That's the narrative. We'll blame an external breach, state actors, maybe something clean and patriotic. Across from him, Linda Barr, the CFO, pushed a printed report across the table. Marcus, this says otherwise. Regulators have the termination order. They know you fired Cross at 10:03 right before the first system error. Then we control the story, Vale barked. No panic, no lakes. A junior aide hurried in, pale and breathless. Sir, the media's already calling it the Vale freeze. It's trending on every major outlet, Vale's jaw tightened. Get comms on it. We're not calling it that, but the words had already taken on a life of their own. The Vale freeze. $2 billion stuck in limbo and counting. Downstairs, Noah Dunn was watching the chaos unfold on the operations floor. Phones rang nonstop. Monitors blinked warnings. The air vibrated with fear and disbelief. He glanced down at his pocket where Alina's reply still sat on his phone, keep the logs. Don't speak to anyone. He obeyed. But he couldn't stop himself from watching as the system he'd once admired started devouring itself. Someone's trying to access the ghost port, whispered a nearby engineer. Trace says external IP local Chicago. Vale's voice thundered from the balcony above. Lock it down, shut out every unauthorized signal. Alina flinched when her screen went black. She'd been seconds from regaining full access when Vale's team slammed the door shut. For a long moment she sat frozen, breathing hard, the silence in her apartment deafening. Then her phone buzzed again, Alina. He's cutting you out, Alina said. You've got maybe 10 minutes before the regulators step in. They already have proof he caused this. Alina closed her eye. Proof won't unfreeze billions. No, but it'll end him. Alina looked back at her monitor. Even with the connection severed, she could see the flickering reflection of code burned into her retinas. Her creation had done its job perfectly, it trusted only its architect. On the 37th floor, Vale's temper broke. She did this, cross-sabotaged my company, he shouted, slamming a fist into the glass table so hard it trembled. Find her now, but it was already too late. Every major financial hub had issued the same declaration: all transactions suspended pending biometric verification. From her apartment window, Elena watched the tower across the river pulse with red emergency lights. For 20 years, she had lived for that building. Now it looked like a cage collapsing in slow motion. Her phone buzzed once more. A new message, this time from an unknown sender. We value architects who build systems that last. If you're free this week, we'd like to discuss opportunities. Elena exhaled, her lips curling into something between disbelief and exhaustion. The world inside the glass tower was imploding, yet somewhere beyond it, someone still understood what she'd built. And for the first time that day, she felt something dangerously close to peace. The Chicago River glittered under the noon sun, indifferent to the ruin unfolding above it. Elena stood across the street from Argent's tower, clutching a cup of coffee gone cold, watching the mirrored glass facade ripple with movement. From this distance, the building looked calm, sleek, powerful, untouched, but behind that reflection, she knew the truth. Through the windows on the 37th floor, she could see shadows darting, people rushing, the choreography of panic. Assistants carrying armfuls of folders. Executives shouting into phones. The illusion of control dissolving minute by minute. The mighty Argent Technologies was hollowing out in real time. She took a slow sip, letting the bitterness settle on her tongue. For the first time all morning, her hands didn't shake. The phone in her pocket buzzed. Elena Briggs again. Elena, the regulator said, her tone clipped but strangely respectful. The board just leaked Vale's termination memo. Every outlet's printing the same headline: Argent collapses under internal negligence. The regulators have proof. It's over. Elena didn't speak right away. She was still staring at the reflection. The tower looked like a cage made of sunlight and glass. Are you okay? Elena asked, her voice softening. I should be, Elena said finally. I thought this would feel like justice. But it just feels empty. You're human, Elena said gently. You spent 2 decades building that place. Watching it fall, it's like watching a part of yourself die. Elena almost laughed. Maybe that part needed to die. A gust of wind whipped across the river, tugging her hair free from its tie. She crossed to a nearby bench, sitting with the tower in full view. For 20 years, she'd been the ghost in that machine, the unseen architect making sure everyone else's mistakes didn't become disasters. She had carried their recklessness, absorbed their praise in silence, taken their blame when it suited them. Now the building looked smaller somehow, like something mortal. Her phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from an unfamiliar number. MS. Cross, this is Adam Kepler from Kepler Dynamics. We've followed the Argent situation closely. We believe in architects who build systems that endure. Are you available to meet? She read it twice. The name stirred something faint in her memory: Kepler Dynamics, a cybersecurity firm known for caution over flash. The opposite of Vale's empire. Her first instinct was suspicion. Offers that came in the middle of chaos were rarely pure. But still, it was validation. Not applause for noise, but acknowledgement of substance. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Not yet, she thought. Not today. She put the phone away and looked up at the tower again. The mirrored surface no longer showed her reflection clearly. It fractured her image into a dozen jagged versions of herself. The loyal employee, the scapegoat, the mother, the woman who'd finally stopped apologizing for being right. For a fleeting moment, she felt something close to peace. Not triumph, never that, but release. The war she'd been fighting in silence was finally visible to the world, and she didn't need to say a word. Behind the glass, she could just make out Marcus Vale pacing the boardroom, his figure distorted by sunlight and distance. She imagined his voice rising, the desperation behind the performance finally cracking. Elena took one last look at the tower that had once owned her. Then she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, "You built your empire on trust you didn't earn, Marcus. And trust doesn't crash, it remembers who broke it." The words vanished into the wind, carried across the river like smoke. For the first time in 2 decades, Elena Cross didn't belong to Argent. She belonged to herself. The operations floor at Argent Technologies looked like a war zone disguised in corporate lighting. Coffee cups littered desks, cables tangled like vines, and every monitor pulsed with red warnings. The overhead fluorescence buzzed faintly, as if the building itself was straining under the weight of panic. Noah Dunn sat in the middle of it all, headset askew, eyes glued to his screen. The words suspended, biometric missing repeated in cold, unblinking rows. No matter how many commands he typed, how many lines of code he rewrote, nothing changed. He could hear Vale shouting upstairs, his voice carried even through the glass walls of the executive level. It was the sound of authority unraveling. Dunn, his supervisor, barked from across the aisle. "What's the latest status?" Noah swallowed hard. "Same as before, sir. Frankfurt, Tokyo, and Toronto are locked. The system won't authorize a single transfer without the original architect's biometric key." His supervisor's face was red, sweaty. "You're telling me a ghost has control of our entire network?" Noah hesitated. "Not a ghost. The person we fired this morning." "Don't say that out loud," his supervisor hissed. "Not unless you want to be next." But Noah couldn't unsee what the code was telling him. Every trace, every error loop pointed to one conclusion: the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. He minimized the terminal and opened the encrypted drive he'd created earlier, the one filled with error logs, timestamps, and screenshots. His fingers hovered over the trackpad. One click could send everything to the regulators. Proof that Marcus Vale had ignored repeated warnings, terminated the architect mid-cycle, and now was lying to the world about it. A whisper of fear threaded through his chest. Whistleblowers didn't get parades, they got blacklisted. He'd seen what happened to people who went against power in this industry. Across the floor, the head of communications was giving a live interview from her desk, her voice shaking slightly. "Argent Technologies is experiencing a temporary systems delay. We want to assure our clients." Noah muted the feed. Temporary systems delay. It was laughable. Billions of dollars were stranded mid-transfer. Pension funds, hospital budgets, government accounts, all frozen. Every second Vale spent denying reality deepened the crater. The elevator doors opened with a sharp ding. Marcus Vale emerged, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened, the shine of charisma finally gone. He stalked through the rows of cubicles like a general inspecting deserters. "Where's the root of this?" he barked. "Who the hell is responsible for letting her code lock us out?" No one answered. The room seemed to hold its breath. Vale's gaze swept the floor and landed on Noah. "You," he said, pointing. "Oh, you're it." "Fix it, I'm trying," Noah said carefully. "But the problem isn't technical anymore. It's structural. It needs obedience," Vale snapped. Not another lecture from a 20-something coder who thinks he knows better. The words stung, but they also ignited something in Noah, a clarity born of exhaustion. "With respect, sir, you don't need obedience. You need accountability." A sharp silence fell. Every head turned. Vale's eyes narrowed. "Say that again." Noah met his gaze, steady now. "You fired the one person who understood the system. And you did it mid-cycle. That's why everything's collapsing. That's why the markets are calling it the Vale freeze." Color rose in Vale's face. "Get out." Noah stood unflinching. Gladly, he ejected the drive from his laptop, pocketed it, and walked past the stunned stares of his coworkers. The elevator doors closed behind him with a soft metallic sigh. As he stepped out onto the street, his phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number: "We have your logs. Thank you for doing the right thing. Alina Briggs." He looked up at the tower, its mirrored glass now streaked with the red reflection of emergency lights, and felt an odd mix of fear and relief. Inside, the empire was collapsing. But somewhere across the city, Alina Cross was watching. And because of him, the truth was finally out there. The moment the global system synchronized, the crash hit like a physical wave. Screens across Argent's tower exploded into red text, all flashing the same words in relentless rhythm: "Suspended, biometric missing." Phones shrieked, alarms blared, and an electric tension thickened the air. The company that prided itself on seamless automation was now paralyzed, its pulse severed. In her apartment across the river, Alina Cross watched the chaos unfold on live television. The camera showed Argent's lobby flooded with reporters, security guards trying and failing to push them back. The headline bar at the bottom of the screen scrolled like a verdict: "The Vale freeze, $2 billion in global transactions locked." She muted the TV, her heart pounding in her throat. She built those systems to be unbreakable, secure from the outside world. She never imagined the real threat would come from within. Her phone rang. Alina Briggs again. Alina, it's over, Alina said. Every regulator across the globe just suspended Argent's trading licenses. Vale's finished, Alina hesitated. And the clients, the transfers, they'll release once your biometric confirms the fail-safe, Alina replied. The problem is you're no longer on the company's authorization list. We need you to re-enter the system manually, Alina's pulse quickened. You're asking me to break into my own work. I'm asking you to fix what he broke. For a long moment, Alina said nothing. The cursor on her laptop blinked like an impatient heartbeat. Outside, sirens wailed, press vans and police cars descending on the Argent. Do I have legal cover? Alina asked finally. If I access the network, Vale will accuse me of sabotage. Alina's tone was steady. We have Noah Dunn's logs. Proof of the termination order. Proof you warned them. If he tries to drag you down, he'll only bury himself deeper. Alina's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could already see the headlines, disgraced engineer hacks frozen network. But she also saw the people behind those numbers. The hospitals whose funding was trapped mid-transfer, the families waiting on paychecks stuck in limbo. Fine, she said quietly. But I do this on my terms. Meanwhile, inside the tower, Marcus Vale was unraveling. His tie hung loose, sweat beading along his hairline as he barked orders into a phone. Override the system, he snapped. I don't care how, just make it work. Sir, we can't, an engineer stammered. Every command is rejected. It wants the architect's biometric confirmation. Vale slammed his fist against the console. Then fake it, forge it, it's impossible, the engineer whispered. The encryption's recursive. You'd need to be her to unlock it. The room fell silent. The word her lingered like a curse. Upstairs, the boardroom had descended into quiet mutiny. Linda Barr stood by the window, arms crossed. Marcus, regulators have already confirmed it. You caused this. Not hackers. Not Cross. You, Vale's face twisted, disbelief giving way to rage. No, she set this up. She wanted revenge. She built integrity, Linda shot back. You built shortcuts. On the street below, a low hum rose, reporters broadcasting live, crowds gathering, the empire Vale built crumbling in public view. At exactly 10:41 a.m., Alina pressed enter. Her home terminal lit up. The ghost port connection pulsed to life. Lines of encrypted data unfolded like veins on a digital heart, and amid the chaos appeared the familiar message she had embedded years ago, architect recognized. System recovery initiated. For a breathless second, Alina felt it, the pulse of the network coming back to life, billions of frozen dollars beginning to move again. But her relief was cut short by a new alert flashing across her screen, trace detected source, internal. Vale had found her. And this time, he wasn't going to lose quietly. The alert on Alina's laptop pulsed red, trace detected source, internal. As she froze, her fingers hovered above the keys, her breath sharp and shallow. Marcus Vale's IT division was actively tracking her signal now. They'd see her IP in seconds. Her only advantage, the element of invisibility, was evaporating. Her phone rang again. Alina. They've found your signal, Alina said before Alina could speak. You have maybe 2 minutes before they lock the port, then I'll make them regret finding me. Alina, don't do anything rash, but she was already typing. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, every keystroke a defiance of the man who had humiliated her. She tunneled deeper into the network, bypassing Vale's newly installed firewalls. On the 37th floor, Vale's voice carried across the operations floor like a whip. Find her location now, sir, one of his analysts stammered. She's rerouting our trait. It's bouncing through 3 mirror servers. Vale slammed a fist onto the desk. She's hacking us from the outside, unbelievable. Downstairs, the emergency lights flickered as if responding to the tension. Vale's empire was collapsing in real time, and he was still trying to win the optics war. Back in her apartment, Alina typed one last line of code and hit enter. Her screen flashed green. Restoration sequence active. Then silence. Her laptop fan spun down, the hum of it fading until she could hear her own heartbeat. Moments later, her phone buzzed with a new notification and email. She almost ignored it, thinking it was another system alert. But the subject line stopped her. We value architects who build systems that last. The sender Adam Kepler, CEO, Kepler Dynamics. She opened it. MS. Cross, we're aware of your role in stabilizing the Argent crisis. What you did today will be studied for years. We'd like to meet, no NDAs, no board theatrics. Just a conversation about building something that deserves to last. Elena stared at the words, a strange mix of exhaustion and disbelief settling over her. She should have felt triumph, vindication, but what she felt was tired. Her phone buzzed again. Elena texting, this time it's over. Veils out. Regulators confirmed your actions saved billions. You did the right thing. Elena looked out her window at the glittering tower across the river, Argent's headquarters, now a monument to arrogance undone. Her reflection ghosted faintly in the glass. For the first time in years, she didn't see an employee or a scapegoat or a relic. She saw the architect. She took a slow breath, then typed her reply to Kepler Dynamics. Let's talk. And hit send. The tower that once gleamed with invincibility now flickered under emergency lights, its polished veneer stripped away. Inside the 37th floor boardroom, Marcus Vale stood in front of the glass wall, his reflection warped by the city lights below. Behind him, the board sat in tense silence, their loyalty evaporating as fast as the company's stock price. Linda Barr was the first to speak. Marcus, she said evenly, the regulators just confirmed the restoration came from outside Argent's network. Elena Briggs personally certified Elena Cross as the verified architect. You lied to the press, to us, and to our investors. Vale didn't turn around. His knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. She hijacked our system, he snapped. She's trying to make me look incompetent. Elliot Kramer, head of risk, leaned forward. Marcus, she didn't make you look incompetent, you did that yourself. You fired the one person who understood our infrastructure and then doubled down on denial. The board has already convened an emergency vote. Vale laughed, sharp and bitter. You think you can oust me in the middle of a crisis? I am Argent. No, Linda said, her voice cutting through the room. You were, she slid a folder across the table, an official document bearing the Argent letterhead. Effective immediately, the board has voted to remove you as CEO. For a moment, Vale just stared at it. Then he shoved the folder off the table, papers scattering like snow. You're making a mistake, he hissed. The market will crucify you without me, Elliot stood. The market already has. The screens along the boardroom wall updated with fresh headlines. Argent stock plummets 68% in 24 hours. Former CEO Marcus Vale under regulatory investigation. Vale's voice cracked. You can't do this. You don't understand what I built here. Linda's tone softened, though her eyes did. You built nothing lasting, Marcus. She did. And you burned it to prove a point. Outside, employees gathered near the elevators, whispering as security officers entered the floor. Vale caught sight of them through the glass, their faces pale with a mix of fear and fascination. For years, he'd been the untouchable showman, the man who turned risk into profit. Now he looked like any other executive caught in his own arrogance. MS. Barr, the security chief said quietly, we're ready. Linda nodded once. Escort him out. As they led Marcus Vale through the operations floor, the same people who once applauded his every word stepped aside without meeting his gaze. His shoes echoed on the tile, a hollow rhythm that followed him all the way to the elevator. When the doors slid shut, the sound of them sealing might as well have been a verdict. Argent's fall wasn't the result of hackers, competitors, or even fate. It was the sound of ego collapsing under the weight of truth. By the time the sun dipped low enough to turn the Chicago skyline amber, the crisis was already being dissected on every financial network in the country. Anchors called it the reckoning of the speed economy. Analysts praised Elena Cross as the architect who saved the markets from themselves. Elena watched it all from the same park bench across the river, a paper cup of coffee cooling beside her. The wind off the water carried the faint hum of traffic, the chatter of reporters still camped outside Argent's tower. To her, it all sounded distant, like echoes from a life that no longer belonged to her. Her phone buzzed with another message from Elena Briggs. Official confirmation, markets fully stabilized. Regulators cleared you of any wrongdoing. The board has agreed to issue a formal apology. Vale's out for good. Elena read the message twice and then set the phone aside. She didn't feel victorious, only still. The phone buzzed again. This time a text from her daughter Maddie. "Mom, are you okay? We saw the news. Everyone is saying you saved the global market." Alina smiled faintly. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed, "I'm fine, honey. Just glad it's over. I'll call you tonight." She leaned back, watching the reflection of Argent's tower shimmer across the river. The building still looked beautiful, but now she saw it differently, not as a symbol of prestige, but as a monument to misplaced faith. 20 years she'd spent inside those walls, believing loyalty could buy security. It never had. Her phone chimed again, an email notification. "Adam Kepler, Kepler Dynamics. We'd still like to meet. You've proven what integrity looks like under pressure. The kind of architecture we want to build isn't just digital, it's ethical. When you're ready, we'll be waiting." Alina read it slowly, letting the words set. She wasn't sure she wanted to jump back into the corporate world, not yet. But something about the phrasing felt honest. "When you're ready. No urgency, no spin. Just respect." She pocketed the phone and rose from the bench. The river wind caught her hair as she turned toward the street where the city stretched ahead, loud, alive, full of possibilities. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's machine. She felt present, awake. As she crossed the bridge, she whispered to herself, "They erased me at 10:03. I got myself back at 10:45. And with that, Alina Cross walked into the evening, not as an employee, not as a cautionary tale, but as the architect of her own freedom.